I can have a conversation with somebody in California, somebody in Utah, somebody in Kansas, somebody in Pennsylvania, and it's literally the same issue with almost the same verbiage, which leads me to believe that there is one common denominator who's influencing us towards this disunity or dysfunction.
So I'm sure, and you've alluded to this with a couple of ideas you just laid out, that there are problems in leadership,
yes.
Whether it's vocational leadership or lay leadership, and you're part of the Institute for Biblical Leadership. So what are some of the challenges that you see, broadly speaking, in leadership, Christian leadership, and what's some of the counsel you give when you see those problems arise?
Yeah, shut the church down because then you won't have any problems. No, I'm just kidding.
Sinners getting together with sinners.
That's right.
Yeah, right.
Stay home. No, I'm just kidding. It's this is a challenge of church life and believers together.
Yeah.
Sometimes we long for glory when we will have our glorified bodies and we will interact perfectly. But in the now moments, we have to figure that out. I think there's probably, as I thought about this question and think about this question, there's probably like 5 general things that. Like I would say, as we're counseling leaders, and what's interesting to me is that issues are issues regardless of geographic location. One of the remarkable things is as we're coaching people, I can have a conversation, and this happens often. I can have a conversation with somebody in California, somebody in Utah, somebody in Kansas, somebody in Pennsylvania, and it's literally the same issue with almost the same verbiage. You just change the names, or you just change some of the nuanced differences, which leads me to believe that there is one common denominator who's influencing us towards this disunity or dysfunction. Obviously Satan desires to destroy our own human flesh, obviously is part of that. But I think 5 major issues, big high level issues that I would say leadership deals with is they don't deal with problems or irritations or conflict in a timely manner. And so it just kind of festers and it just kind of sits there and there's an agitation there. And, we would encourage leaders to be very quick to address an issue. Now, sometimes it's just something that, they're having a bad day. They're in a rough spot. They need to process. I respond. There's no issue there with Aaron or with Jesse. I just am processing this bad. But maybe there is a problem, a relational issue. Well, you need to deal with that. Proverbs 17:9, where we're reminded, whoever covers an offense seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates close friends. And so we have friendships that are separated and relationships that are broken because we didn't deal with things in a timely manner. Matthew 5, obviously, if you have a fault with your brother, leave your sacrifice at the altar, go to him, address it, deal with it. So I think a lot of leaders struggle to address things in a timely manner. I think, second of all, they don't steward their role well that God has given to them. I think one of the things that we address a lot, even like lay elders, staff elders, is they'll often be dealing with an issue, and they would say, "Well, me personally, I'm not a confrontational person, or I don't want to deal with this." Okay, I understand that. But God has put you into a position, and you need to steward that position He has placed you in, especially as an elder. And so you may not have a personality that wants to confront or wants to address or wants to be bold. You may be a shy, reserved person. However, in your role, you need to steward that in order to address, speaking the truth in love. And so I think there's a lot of struggle for, especially with lay elders, staff elders. They confuse their personality and their role, and they want to kind of superimpose their personality onto their role and say, well, I'm not that way, so I'm not going to steward my role well. And so just trying to encourage them that obviously there's, Titus 1:7, 1 Peter 4:10 talks about stewarding the roles that God has given to us. I think a third one, this is very practical. People often do not stay in their own lane. And so some of that is because there's not clearly defined lanes within a church structure. And so people are stepping on each other's toes. But sometimes you get some guys who are super excited about serving, and then they're getting into everybody else's business in ways that they probably shouldn't. And so, I always try to tell guys, just stay in your lane, know your lane, stay in your lane, which is not always easy to do, especially if you feel like somebody else is not doing their lane like you would do it. And, so obviously dealing with that. And then I think another issue that leaders face is trying to have control in a way that God never intended them to have control. And so I think that can actually infiltrate through the whole church, that can actually be congregants trying to have control in a way that God never intended them to have control. Elder teams trying to have control in a way that God never intended them, or an individual pastor, or some combination. And so that's certainly some challenges. And then I think the final big idea of challenges that leaders face is not getting help until it's too late. And some of that is rooted out of pride. Some of that is rooted out of insecurities. It's rooted out of a number of things. But so often what we deal with, especially in crisis situations where churches have gotten to the point of splitting, is they want to call us, and they do, and they're like, hey, here's where we're at. Our church is splitting. And oftentimes we can look at it and say, had you called us 6 months ago or a year ago, like, it's like marriage counseling. As a pastor, you deal with marriages, and they're like, hey, we're about ready to get a divorce, but can you help us? Well, we could have been helping you a lot better sooner. And so I think leaders that wait too long to get help and get encouragement in that way.